Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
I do think the easiest way in is through the individual students, and again, looking at what you've done and talking about that. It's very, very simple. So it could be a half-hour conversation. I mean, we went into this knowing that one caring person can make all the difference in a young person's life. You, I'm sure, know that from your experience as a CASA and just doing the work that you do. I also would want people to know that that small act is part of a much bigger picture that we're helping manage, and that's kind of the good news. That's a hard part of our work, to manage all the people who, there are a lot of people who want to sort of plug in. I think we're really good at making reciprocal relationships and connections. So again, I'll know someone was a nurse and loves talking about nursing, so I'll connect them to a nursing student. I know someone's looking for a cause, and we'll talk to them, or maybe left a big job and is now looking for the next chapter, and we'll share what we're doing, and then they become a board member.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and today Jayne Amelia speaks with Romi, Lassaly, and Patrick McCabe, the founders of Ready to Succeed, a program that supports college-bound students who are impacted by foster care, or scholars, as they like to call them, by helping them get into school, stay in school, and flourish after school with resources, relationships with passionate professionals, career coaching, and so much more. Here's Romi, Lassaly and Patrick McCabe.
Okay, hi, I am here with Romi, Lassaly, and Pat McCabe. Hey kids, how you doing?
Great, thanks for having us.
Okay.
Hi, so can you tell me how you met?
Pat, you take this one.
We have a wonderful mutual friend named Abby Adams, and we were just both at a point in our lives where we were both recovering business people, so to speak, and we're just at a cross section in terms of what to do moving forward. And we both had a big interest in sort of foster and homeless issues as it related to high school and college students. And Abby was aware of that, and she brought us together about 8 years ago right now. So we're coming into the 8th anniversary of Ready to Succeed.
Right, and you're the co-founders of Ready to Succeed. So Romi, can you tell me a little bit about what kind of work you do together?
Sure. Well, thanks, Pat, for that intro about our intro, because it was a really fortuitous moment. So we give a big shout out to Abby for making the introduction. So the program has evolved a lot in the past 8 years, but it is currently a program really focused on really incredible students who are in college, foster youth and first generation students. And these are the 4% now. The stats off change they're pretty fluid, but it's now up to about 4% of foster youth who graduate college. And both Pat and I realized that it was an incredible feat, a Herculean feat, that these kids had made it so far, but that there really wasn't support while they were there. So our program really addresses that. And we have a 5-pillar program. We focus on really intensive career coaching and college advising. We're almost personal career navigators for each one of our students who's assigned someone right when they start the program, normally as sophomores, rising sophomores in college. We really focus on building their social capital, not just teaching them how to network or how to walk into a room, but putting people in their path. So Pat and I, one of the things we did when we first met was to say, what's the formula for success? What worked for us? What worked for our kids? And we thought, God, if we could give that to these young people, that would really be incredible. And so we realized they don't have inherited networks, right? They don't come into this with, parents who know anyone or people who know other people who might be able to help. So we really focus on network building, tapping into our own networks initially, and then watching that network expand exponentially so that students can meet these people, they become the basis for their networks, and then they in turn, when they graduate, become the network for the undergrads. We focus on internship placement because we know that it's such a paradox that you have to have a job to get a job, and to get a job you have to have had a job, and that really comes down to internships. And again, foster youth don't have access to these opportunities, so we make sure to provide those. Targeted financial support in the form of money to cover basic needs, to cover career development, whether it's certification classes or clothing, or again, unpaid internships, we cover those. We make sure we have a network of other partners for all the other things that come up, whether it's housing, mental health resources. Am I missing anything, Pat?
No, that's a lot.
Okay, that's a lot. I know. Well, you know what? We realize kids, young people need a lot, so our program has to do a lot. And I think what makes us unique is that we realize that you can't do it right any other way, to be honest. Like it all has to be done. It really all has to be done to have success. And even then, there's no guarantee, but it's definitely, I think, helps the people we work with get as close to it as possible.
It's clear that you have been speaking about this a lot. So, and you're doing it really well. And I know our listeners will appreciate that, because a lot of the people who listen to the podcast either have been in the system or they're curious about what is happening in the system and they're considering getting involved. And I think what's difficult for people to understand is what these kids need. And you guys have been zeroing in on it. You've used your expertise in the for-profit world to figure out what works and what can we implement, what is sustainable, what else do we need, right? So it's not just a question of making sure their dorm rooms look good, although that's really important too. When a kid comes out of the system and they're in college for the first time, they have nothing, right? There's no blankets, there's no curtains, there's no pillows. But they also need the other tools to get them through college and then into a productive life. And you guys have actually really thought about that. So did you study it, or did you just have you been winging it and doing it well, or what?
Well, we come from slightly different places in that, also, as well as being a businessman, I was the head of a school for 12 years. And at that school, New Road School, where I am one of the co-founders, we had a program where we were placing high-performing, high school-age foster youth into private and parochial schools, including our own school here in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, our sister school, Crossroads School, Harvard, Westlake, Brentwood, Marlboro, Archer. These are high-end, mostly white prep schools on the west side. And 100% of these students in our program into these schools were graduating high school. 100% were going to college. 100% were graduating college. The very first youth I worked with at 13 years old, we put him into Brentwood School nearby here, and he's now on our board and ready to
Awesome.
succeed. He's 34 years old, and he's a director at Verizon in Washington, D.C. So I never suspected that they would struggle academically because they were very gifted kids, but I always felt they would struggle sociologically, that they'd end up at USC sitting next to a young woman in class whose family had a private plane, and they came out of a group home. So my orientation was always to help those kids. I'm in touch with a lot of them. Romi knows that. But I always wondered what happened to them on move-in day, where they brought all their possessions in a plastic trash bag, or what happened to them on parents' weekend, where they didn't have parents and their peers were going out to dinner to some nice place near the university, and they were hiding in the library. So that was really my orientation. But there was an element of starting it up and being a little naive about just being a career accelerator, that there were all these other issues, mental health, housing, transportation, a myriad of things. So I think we've come in 8 years. We've really come a long way.
Yeah, I mean, thank God with Pat had the expertise working with foster youth. I had zero. So when you asked me about winging it, there was a lot on my part. There was a lot of winging it. Um, as Pat said, we were a little naive. We thought we could bring this really high level coaching program, which was kind of the basis. I mean, I get stepping back even before that, we thought we'll make introductions. We'll go to our friends. We'll make introductions we'll find the students. Let's start there. We'll meet them regardless of where they are. And when we started, we had 6 students who most of them were seniors. It was May, and we were thinking we're going to get them jobs in June, right? I think it was that short a time span that we thought we could actually do what we set out to do, and that we would introduce them to people and opportunities. That's what we thought. We quickly realized, I think, after that first summer, that coaching was really important. So although we had the opportunities, some of these students weren't, nobody could really be as ready to walk through the doors as we were hoping they might be. So we introduced a very high level coaching and communications program through a woman who was introduced to us by an incredible advocate and donor now, Justine Stamen. And she said, I want you to meet my friend Lucy. She's a communications coach. She's amazing. She wants to volunteer. Again, a bit naive, thinking this program, which worked for Fortune 500 executives, was going to work for younger students. It did, and we've modified it now, so it really works beautifully. But as Pat said, those 3 pieces were great, but whoa, what about everything else that comes up? So we can have a job or a person who works at Google, as Pat always says, but if you don't know where you're living when you graduate or, for a Christmas break, you can't be thinking about that.
Yeah, it's just too overwhelming, right? That when you have to figure everything out on your own. So I want to ask you, what kind of background did you have, Romy? What was your early life, your family of origin?
Good question. I'm an only child. My parents divorced when I was 3. I was raised primarily by my mom, who was a single working mother. And I had lots of love, but not a lot of support, just because my mom was working. And so I do feel like I did have to do a lot on my own and became pretty good at it. And, all through school and while I was in college, I spent a lot of time in the Career Center because I think I was really worried about what would happen after. So I think that's like some of the genesis of my connection to this work.
That's interesting. So you, even as a young girl, you thought, okay, how am I going to get to where I want to be?
Absolutely.
As opposed to just living your life and playing sports and swimming and playing with lipstick.
Nope.
And reading books. You said, no, I'm going to have to figure it out because maybe no one else will.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it was also generational. I don't know what Pat has to say about this, but parents seem to be much less involved in their children's lives as I was growing up, whether they had multiple siblings or very connected parents. It did seem like you're kind of go figure it out, go to the Career Center. Maybe someone will make an introduction to someone, but I don't know if I was completely alone in that.
Right. And how did you realize your dreams career-wise? What happened in your 20s and your 30s?
I think I know it started while I was in college. I was, again, spending a lot of time in the Career Center, and I thought, what do I want to do? And I had an interest in entertainment, and my mother had worked sort of tangentially in the entertainment business. She was the secretary for Sherwood Schwartz, who created the Brady Bunch. Just plug for the Brady Bunch here.
Wow.
and my mom. But that was it. That was all I knew. And I just pursued different opportunities. Had an idea about one company I wanted to work for. Got a job there. It was a pretty big casting company, and happened to walk across this 20th Century Fox. It was still the 20th Century Fox lot one day, and bumped into someone, or I was delivering a script to someone who said, oh, there's an opportunity working for an executive here. And that really was one of those critical inflection points where I said, okay, and I took that job as an intern, and then I had an opportunity to take it as a full-time job. And I said to my mom and my stepdad, I'm going to leave college. I was still a senior in college, and they were not happy. But I did it anyways. I'm sure partly out of fear, like, whoa, what's a degree going to do for me? I really think I'm on my path now. And I did have a very nice career in the entertainment business. I also did go back to UCLA and graduate in 2013, many, many years after my original
Wow,
date.
as a grown woman, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I feel like,
You can say that you became a senior vice president at Disney if you'd like.
yeah. And then I did. I had a really nice career in the industry. Like I said, started in casting, worked in development, I did have nice executive positions. I was married, got pregnant, I had to go on bed rest while I worked at Disney, had to leave that, and kind of had different experiences working for different very demanding producers in Hollywood, and until I had to retire out of that because it was really too stressful being a mother and working in entertainment.
So I know that Pat has said that he feels this work is the most important thing he's ever done, and I want to ask about that in a minute. But what about for you, Romi? How do you feel about what your organization is doing?
I couldn't agree more with Pat. I feel like everything I did, including that walk across the Fox lot to today, led me to doing this, connecting young people to opportunities, getting connected to Pat. I mean, everything. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to be doing this. It truly feels like a calling, and I'm good at certain things. Had to learn a lot of other things, which I also enjoy, but I just feel so lucky to be doing this work.
And for Pat, you've been an educator, a coach, a businessman, and this means what to you?
It's just the culmination of a lot of things, but the common thread for me working in sports and TV was being a model and mentor, or a teacher, if you will, to younger people. From the very start, I was in management, and my biggest thrill was not the biggest sale or the biggest year of revenue, but seeing someone develop, starting as an assistant and ending up as a senior vice president. So I always knew in the back of my mind that I would be a teacher and a coach. And after those 23 years, I was fortunate enough that Rupert Murdoch bought out the company I was working for. And I was able to go to New Roads and become a teacher and a coach and a headmaster for 12 years. So my life has been sports and TV. The sports part is great. Jobs are just content and process, as Romi hears me say. And the content when you work in sports is great because you're reading the sports section for work every morning. It's fantastic. The process, not so interesting. But I finally kind of got to my goal running a school and coaching teams and teaching in high school where I wanted to get. And a lot of that for me was because my own father did not have a high school degree, but he went to Brown on the GI Bill. He was Phi Beta Kappa. He went to Harvard Law School. He was near the top of his class at Harvard Law School. And then he taught at Harvard and he taught here at USC Law School for 13 years. So my dad set a really great example for me in terms of being a teacher and a model and mentor. He tutored a couple hundred different family friends for the bar, and they all
Right,
passed.
and he went back
So
and got his GED as a grown man in much the same way that Romi went back got her
he did.
bachelor's degree, right?
Yeah, Claiborne Pell was his friend from Rhode Island, as in the Pell Grants, which we deal with now. And he did get his, before he died, he got his high school degree. It was very important to him. But so that he was my role model. And then the 12 years, and then running this program at New Road School, having some board oversight, and seeing that these students, foster, homeless, first gen, undocumented a lot of times, are the least served of the underserved. And we famously agreed when we started this thing, we weren't going to work with overserved kids. We were going to work with underserved kids. Because it's important to me as a Jesuit Catholic that the least shall lead us, as we say. So these are the people I want to be around. And I would just echo what Romi said. Romi and I get so much more out of this than any individual student we've ever had.
Isn't that an extraordinary phenomenon? And once you feel it, you really can't go back. I feel the same way about the volunteer work that I do with kids and also my work as a CASA. It is undoubtedly the most fulfilling work I've ever done. I mean, it's not even work. It's just fantastic. But I'm always curious: is it why aren't more people arriving at that? And I want to ask you about that because I'm sure you're both in a position where you're constantly asking people for things. So how do you spin it?
Well, it's we have many different spins, don't we, Pat? I mean, I think when Pat and I
Yes.
first met and we sat down, I said, Pat, I had a yellow legal pad, and I'm like, let's go through everyone you know. Like, I'm going to take a list of everyone you know because they're really going to be of value, and I'm going to share everyone I know because we both share that we have a deep bench of people in our lives, and we have no problem leveraging our networks for good. We've done it. We were doing it informally for years. How can we help someone's, a friend's kid get a job or get into a school, anything and everything. They called me Romi Rolodex. Our older listeners will know what that was. I just love sharing resources. I really, really do. Not even in a transactional way. And when we realized quickly that our list would be too long, we had to let's start with the students and what they need, and then let's dig into our shared Rolodexes. But I think both Pat and I knew that we could seed the network, but that to keep this growing and going, we had to take this beyond ourselves, and that's, I think, a key component of our program. It's not only about us; it's about bringing, as you said, how do we do it, but it's bringing people into the network to open their networks to people outside their networks. So picture the visual of that. But the way we spin it with some people is we have a student who's interested in nursing, and I was just with a friend who's a nurse, and I said, hey, I was just with Edgar, who's at UCLA. Would you talk to Edgar about your experience as a nurse? And we do that with anyone and everyone. And it's easy for us. Some people say no. It's hard for us to hear, but most people say yes. And one of our newest board members said to us about what we do, it's the shortest. She said, I just wanted to make impact, and I wanted to find the shortest distance between me and impact. And Ready to Succeed is that. You give us the opportunity to connect with people. We get to share our expertise. You're not asking us to do things we don't know how to do. And it just can grow from there. People become more involved. They support us financially. They give our students opportunities at their companies. They show up at Project Dorm Room, which you mentioned, the idea of moving kids into dorms. I hadn't thought about that as an issue, and we were lucky to meet someone who was doing a program providing dorm room supplies at UCLA. And that woman, Ton Schuster, has become a board member of ours, and Project Dorm Room, as it's now called, has become a big program of ours. So I guess as time has gone on, we've seen more needs and found other ways to satisfy those needs with existing programs. We really try not to reinvent the wheel.
Pat, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just that, people who do this work, it doesn't pay that well, as it turns out.
Amazingly, it doesn't.
I'm finding out.
No.
In fact,
It
maybe
really
it costs
does.
you.
And so,
Yeah.
in my case, that's the case. So I'm always thinking of this as situational and ego, that you have to be in a position where you can dedicate your life to these underrepresented students. You have to be able to afford it. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is ego. I meet so many people here on the west side of Los Angeles, very successful investment bankers, but you can't convince me that an investment banker who's worth $100 million really needs to keep being an investment banker. Why is that person still working 12 hours a day when they have $100 million in the bank and they have 4 houses and they go to Europe every summer? And that ego part of it is really interesting to me. And we're not saints. We're just social workers, really. But I always wonder about those people with that expertise where they're becoming a model and mentor for our individual students by talking about themselves. They're talking about their own backgrounds and what they've accomplished and what they've done. And most people like to do that. So that's not hard to sell. To get people really truly involved is a bit of a hard sell, and I don't know why.
Yes, I think it's always a challenge. With the group that I work with on Saturdays, Peace for Kids, they have a really good retention rate for their volunteer community, but it's still a huge challenge. It's to get outside yourself on a regular basis and say, what can I do today that is not for me, but is for someone else? This brings me to the question I've started to ask my guests is, what values do you think about, and how were you raised in terms of values, and how has that changed as you have become an adult and the work you're doing? Did you ever, like, I'll give you an example for myself. Well, I didn't think about values when I was little. I'm sure we had values in my family, but we didn't discuss values. I think my father expected us to have integrity and conscientiousness. I guess those are values, but nobody said the word value, right? My mom had other values. She wanted us to speak well and to behave appropriately, and it turns out now she also wants us to be kind and compassionate. But that's after a long life. But she raised 10 kids. I think it was pretty rough for her for a while. So yeah, I come from a family of 10, and it was just chaos. So. Uh,
Wow.
and I also actually understand what it's like to get very little support, because I was at the bottom end of a family. I had a lot of help from my brothers and sisters, but in the end, it's just like you're in it for yourself. Like, figure out how am I going to do that? I don't know. I'm going to pretend, or I'll muddle through it. But anyway, just to get back. So can you tell me, and either one of you to start, what 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 value means to you, if you think about them?
I think like you, I didn't think a lot about values. I too was raised to be a good, kind, caring person, but I don't really, again, my parents didn't have a lot of time to be philanthropic or resources. So while I was raised in a fairly reformed Jewish household, I maybe I got some of the kind of tikkun alum via osmosis by being a little kid at the West Side Jewish Community Center daycare.
Right.
But I
Can you
think
explain that concept for me? I know it, but I bet my listeners don't. And could you say it again for me, because I never say it
I,
correctly?
I think it's tikkun alum, and I'm literally going to have to look it up. But I mean, for me, it means giving back. And I mean, I go to a temple where social justice is really at its core, and that's about fighting for the rights of others, fighting for what is right, which I guess is somewhat subjective, but it really is the concept of giving back and giving of, and I think very similar to Pat's Jesuit philosophy of that is so important, and I'm doing my best to impart that to my children who are now older and grown. But I don't think you can. I've modeled it, thank God, but I can't make them do it. I'm seeing my children kind of take it in and act upon it in their own ways. But it's such an interesting question because I wasn't explicitly raised with specific values.
And you, Pat?
Yeah, for myself, again, I come back to being a man or woman for others, which is our Jesuit motto, is what I live by. But I think of my own family, and there were 5 of us, which isn't quite 10, but there was still chaos in our family.
Okay, my dad would say that's a good start.
And my dad was the oldest of 8, and my mom was the youngest of 7. And so my aunts and uncles thought, well, what's wrong with you? Only 5 kids. Same thing, same idea. But I think what it was at the root of it was the greatest generation post-war, and the whole thing in our family revolved around modesty. And the prevalent saying in our family was, if you can't listen while you're talking, and if you came home to the dinner table and said, I scored 25 points in a basketball game today, you would get shoved off the reservation. You would get sent to your room, So I think it was about modesty and being a man or woman for others. It's just a really simple idea. My mom was the same way. My mom was head of everything, head of the PTA, head of this, head of that. I've been on 21 boards. My brothers are very, very involved in nonprofit work, and they do anything for anybody. So I think it was just a prevailing ethic that we had to live by, and I've ended up there. I certainly didn't start there, but I've ended up there.
So if you had to think about, if you think of somebody listening right now and who is not involved, what would you say to them to hope to get them involved? even, and not necessarily about money, but just really like showing up. I know that that's what you do regularly, but for someone you don't know, let's say, if you're not asking from a friend.
Well, I think the recognition about the idea of this permanent underclass is for real, regardless of your political orientation or your religious or whatever it is, that these people are the least served of the underserved. Now, when you work in a school, I was always struck about parents who would come in and say, what I can't do anything for the school. What can I do? I mean, I'm a housewife. What can I do? And I would say, can you read to a 3-year-old? Do you read to your own kid? And they'd say, well, of course I do. I do that every day. And I said, well, you can come to my school and do that every day. How about that? And that's the first step. And invariably, you get people say that very first thing, well, what can I do? What can I do? Well, you can do something really simple. You can talk to a student for 30 minutes about what it's like to be an architect. And that maybe that's where it begins and where it ends. So people all over this country, all over this world, there's such a myriad of opportunities to get involved in what we call nonprofit. And I think a lot of times we've chosen this because they're young people, and I'm an educator and I want to work with young people. That's my thing. But I think you have to pick an area to get involved in. I think it's important to think about the elderly. I think it's important to think about the disabled. It's obviously important to think about homeless people. And so there are all kinds of opportunities to get involved, and not 50 hours a week, not as a career, not quitting your job as a banker and becoming a social worker with Romi and I. I mean, I don't really advocate for that. But there's always something to do if you really gave it some thought and you thought simply about it.
Rama, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do think the easiest way in is through the individual students, and again, looking at what you've done and talking about that. It's very, very simple. So it could be a half-hour conversation. I mean, we went into this knowing that one caring person can make all the difference in a young person's life. You, I'm sure, know that from your experience as a CASA and just doing the work that you do. I also would want people to know that that small act is part of a much bigger picture that we're helping manage, and that's kind of the good news. That's a hard part of our work, to manage all the people who, there are a lot of people who want to sort of plug in. I think we're really good at making reciprocal relationships and connections. So again, I'll know someone was a nurse and loves talking about nursing, so I'll connect them to a nursing student. I know someone's looking for a cause, and we'll talk to them, or maybe left a big job and is now looking for the next chapter, and we'll share what we're doing, and then they become a board member. We love connectors and super connectors who like to do what we do, but just is it's thrilling to us and our superpower. Finding an outlet to do what they didn't even realize was such a superpower is really thrilling. I mean, when we do find the people who want to connect, it's like finding your partner. It's a relationship, and people almost have to see it and feel it to believe it sometimes.
So in the very name of your organization is Ready to Succeed. So succeed. It's, but I'm sure the kids fail too, right? So has that ever happened? Have you felt you couldn't get through to somebody or not help them succeed?
Well, it's never going to be 100% success rate. I mean, when you think about, I want to say 3%, still 4% of all foster youth graduating a 4-year school, that's 25 foster kids in a room, and only one's going to graduate college. So it's not a pyramid of failure, but it's a pyramid of real difficulty. And so you have to always keep that in mind. I go back to a time where we had a very brilliant student at USC, and she received a Fulbright. We've had several kids get Fulbright, and I believe she's at Columbia Law School, Romi now, or Berkeley Law School. Anyway, the same day that we heard that we had a student at her school at USC on suicide watch, a young woman from Florida who had all kinds of problems. I mean, has really come around. But you have that level of success, that student, really bad foster background, gets the Fulbright, and then you get the student who ran away to USC from an abusive household in Florida and is in suicide watch. So this was a hard thing for Ronnie to understand, that you can't really save everybody, and not every single one of your friends is going to give you $10,000 or whatever it is. So, you have to go with the greater good. Now, people on the outside would say to us, well, what about the other 96%? What are you doing for foster youth? When 96% of them, 25% when they graduate, come out of the system, are going to be homeless. 50% are going to be underemployed. There are all these horrible statistics. And we have to say that we're creating models and mentors and leaders, and that's what we do. And going forth, they're going to lead their people, and they're going to lead the society. So, and it's all we can do. We can't address the 35,000 foster youth in LA County, but we found a segment, a tunnel that we can go through successfully.
And yes, please go ahead, Ronnie.
Well, I was just going to say, we're careful about the word save, because we are not saving, and we're careful. We use it. I mean, it comes out because, but I think we've realized that the students have to meet us halfway. We can only kind of help them rise to the level that they are capable of because of it's not just their motivation and their talent, it's because of also the obstacles in their path, whether it's their trauma, their, family members that exist, that I didn't realize there could be so many family members for people who didn't have, in my mind, family. I think it's been a hard and long lesson, which I'm continuing to learn, that each student's different. Like, you learn about one student and you learn about one student. Like, you can't necessarily take every lesson and apply it, which means you're back to square one sometimes. I have to say, our first less than successful story was devastating for me. I just thought, oh my God, what did we do wrong? How could we not do this? And not realizing there was so much I didn't know about. But again, we kind of try to meet the students where they are, do what we can, enhance our program as we can, bring in partners, because we cannot do this alone. And like Pat said, we do our best.
Right. So when that happened, you didn't cower and lick your wounds and hide. You did you have a hot wash and say, okay, let's figure out what went wrong, or I mean, even if you can, right? Because sometimes you can't even figure out. There isn't enough information.
I think it was very clear at that point that the mental health aspect of what we were doing wasn't enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And that could be overpowering. So we didn't just move on to the next one, so to speak, but we did reevaluate the idea that there were issues on the sides of these students that we couldn't, and it was something I had to learn in my previous program, working with the high school students who end up going to Stanford and can't hack it there because of mental issues. So that set us on a path where we had to the best we could do. We're not psychotherapists. We're just connectors and work in a career program. So we had to realize that was a huge part of it, and that we had to do something about it. And so at that point, we brought in some therapists, volunteer therapists, who are helping us, as well as an actual company that gives us a terrific pro bono rate.
And we also, and I'm so glad you said that, because it really is, I think every student we've had challenges with, or they've had challenges where they had to leave the program, it really all came down to mental health issues, always. Whether it was a psychotic break, which I'd never seen before, and now I realize I've seen several, or just the trauma just constantly coming up in success, which again was really surprising. We're thinking, oh, you're graduating college, and now we know why. In so many ways, it's, as Pat says, the best day and the worst day. Also, what's going on psychologically as these young people move towards success. There's so much fear, and that it's just not all good, and that is a constant struggle for us, I think. And in addition to bringing on the therapists, which was so important, we brought in trauma-informed coaching for our volunteers and for our staff. I and did not, you ask, winging it? Yes. Winging it to the point where I'd be crying in my car. I'd be talking to someone who's now our board chair. He'd be crying in his car. We just were in over our heads. So, I mean, Pat was, thank God, calmer, more, experienced heads prevailed. But it's been quite a journey learning about the real challenges that our students have faced and continue to face.
So you started with 5 or 6 kids, right? And now you've helped serve over 500, I think you said, Pat?
We're up around 500, including the first gen scholars as well as the foster scholars. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got to remember to say scholars because I really like that you do that, right? Right? They're not
Well,
kids. They're not foster kids. They're not at-risk kids. They're not problem kids. They're scholars.
we slip once in a while, which only because of our ages, we say kids once in a while. But we call them scholars or our students. Yes.
But I do think it does help. We really try to say scholars, and we try not to say foster youth because we know a foster experience is just an experience. But sometimes kids, when you ask about how you bring people in, you say you have kids. These are kids like your kids. You know how you help your kids? We want to help these kids as in the same way. So I think that's the only time where it's actually with the right audience appropriate. I'd be curious to hear what the scholars/kids feel when they hear us say kids. That might be something we go back and ask them.
So I want to ask you one last thing that I ask all my guests, and I'm gonna, if you can think about it for a minute, but what is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
Yeah, I think along those lines, talking to the students, and they say, well, I didn't go to this party because I didn't know anybody. And I would say, I wouldn't have gone either. And they look, I'm the big, funny Irish grandfather, to them. That's really my role. And so I would say to them, well, I wouldn't either because I have severe social anxiety. And no one knows it except for me. And I think I might be saying it. I'll be 68. I might be saying it for the first time in public. And Rami's shocked. Well, you're the big, friendly funny Irish guy, And everyone does. Everyone doesn't want to go to that party. I say to the students, no one wants to go to that party not knowing anybody. Now, the Irish solution, obviously, is to have a couple drinks before you go and loosen up. And, you'll get to know everybody. And Rami's been with me where she's seen me do that. I'm to blame for that. But the one thing I want everyone to know that I'm finding out about the world is that everyone has social anxiety. And to break through it, it takes some courage. And so, once again, I do not worry about our students academically. I do not worry about their placement. They're going to make it. They're going to be okay. But I do worry about what comes down to social anxiety and what we would call imposter syndrome as it relates to these students. And as it relates to me and my social circle, maybe there's a lot of imposter syndrome going on.
Pat, thank you for sharing that. It did surprise me when we went to an event where Pat didn't know anyone, and I assumed Pat was the most social person, and he is the most social person with people he knows. And I was thinking, why are you not talking to anyone? What's going on? So that was very helpful. You've set the bars with both of you is very high. Maybe it's similar. I'm a super extrovert, so I enjoy social situations. I definitely have anxiety when I don't know anyone. But I definitely have my fair share of imposter syndrome. And I think I don't think most people know about my upbringing. We have a younger staff. I mean, Pat and I are the older white founders. And I think there's some assumptions that we come from a lot of privilege and it's been easy. But I think one thing people wouldn't know is that it hasn't been easy. And that I think being an only child was not a great experience, just such a solitary experience, and that I had to do so many things on my own. And I'm truly, by working in a program that is so focused on mentorship and relationships and connection, I am getting to, is this when people cry on the show? This must be what happens. No, I'm really getting to, create what I didn't have. And so I think that's what people don't know.
That's really well said.
Always get me to cry.
Well, that's very moving, and I'm sure that's part of why your work is so successful. I do believe, and maybe this is the reason why I always ask this question, and this is just occurring to me right now, that I do think that people, that overcoming obstacles is often a path to truth. And I think both of your examples uh, are just a testament to that. And I guess,
Well, we tell them all the time, the, the road to success that doesn't have bumps on it is not going anywhere.
Mm.
You know, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But again, that transference to people like us, Romi and myself, where they just presume everything was always okay and it wasn't. We all know that. It's just my favorite thing my dad ever said over and over again was nobody rides for free. And we have to kind of convey that to our students. And you're exactly right, that the road to success has bumps on
is there anything else either one of you would like to add?
it. Robbie, I was talking to the wonderful young Joshua who we met last week at UCLA. And I gave him my card and I said, call me anytime and we'll go to lunch and we'll talk about what you're doing. So he got up the gumption a week later. He followed orders and he called me at home. And he said, you had said that maybe we could go to lunch. And I said, yeah, I'll go to lunch with you anytime. Next week, week after, whatever you want to do, I'll come meet you and we'll go to lunch. And in all my time of doing this, working with thousands of kids, this response I never had. He said, well, why would you do that? And he stumped me. And I said, well, what? So I turned it around and I said to him, well, do you like me? I mean, did I make a good impression with you? He said, Mr. McCabe, you can call me Pat. You made an incredibly good impression. That's why I'm calling you. I mean, you worked in sports and I want to work in sports, and you played basketball and I played basketball, and we have all these things in common. I said, well, yeah, well, let's get together and talk about it. He goes, well, I still don't understand why, but I'll see you next week. And so this kind of equivalency amongst humans is really important. I'm just some person, he's just some person, and there's an equality to that. And these foster youth didn't ask to have a foster background, to be so unlike so many mainstream students. And but at the end, I come back to this human equivalency of one-on-one, and I finally kind of convinced Josh that we were equivalents. That I'm 68 and he's 21, whatever else, but we're still just in this world together, and everyone's in this world together just trying to figure it out.
And I just want to add that, like Pat said, we can't solve the bigger issue that we see with 35,000 foster youth in LA County, but we are focusing on one area, and we do see this high failure rate with foster youth, with transition age foster youth, as being a solvable problem. If there's a formula or a recipe for what young people need to thrive, whether it's mentors or financial support or housing, basic needs all the way to the career piece, it's a solvable problem. Like, there are people to plug into each one of those buckets. And that's, I think, what keeps us going and keeps us expanding our network and asking people to expand their networks, because it's a solvable problem. It's a bit of a management issue, a logistics issue, but the people are there, the students are there, the opportunities are there, all the resources are there. We just have to keep connecting the dots. And I think that's what's so exciting about the work we do, and that's where there are so many opportunities for other people to get involved.
I think it's management and organizational, as our mutual friend Paul Frees would say. Okay, there may be 1,000 or so court-appointed special advocates, so we need 34,000 more of them. How are we going to get them?
That's right.
And Paul Frees thinks that way. He's like, Pat, come up with a plan where I recruit 34,000 more models and mentors who become court-appointed special advocates, CASAs. So the resources are all there. We're incredibly optimistic about the resources. It's just organizing them and managing them that everyone's struggling with.
But we think we're getting close to a model that's really that hopefully can be scalable, where every student in school can have this access to people and career opportunities simultaneous to their academic opportunities. There's just so many ways to bring schools as partners in, to bring public dollars in. We are getting a great grant to provide scholarship money. That's our first big public funding. So the money's there, the people are there, the partners are there. We just have to piece it all together. And one at a time. How do you do it? Not 34,000 at a time. We do it one student. We think about recruiting 100 more at a time,
Yeah.
but we really do it one at a time.
One starfish at a time.
One starfish at a
Exactly.
time?
Yeah, the woman on the beach, and she's throwing the starfish back in the ocean, and there are thousands of them. And a guy says, well, what are you doing? You'll never be able to throw 5,000 starfish back in the ocean. She said, yeah, but I can do it one at a time.
That's nice, Pat. That's nice. Yeah.
That's a good
All right.
one.
That's a good one. I think we appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Romi and Patrick, for taking the time to do this interview. What you're doing with Ready to Succeed is phenomenal. And you two are giving back in a huge way by providing the resources for these young men and women to succeed. So really, thank you so much for being here and sharing what you do. Next week, join us for Taiji Charity, founder of Kids in the Spotlight. And since 2009, Kids in the Spotlight, or KITS, has created over 85 films with more than 850 youth impacted by foster care. Join us next week for Taiji Charity. Thank you for listening, and be well. If you or someone you know is harming themselves or thinking about harming themselves, go to crisistextline.org. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposta. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.org. See you next time.